The asteroid field stretched endlessly into the black void of space. Rocks the size of mountains floated in silence, their surfaces rich with precious metals that made men wealthy and killed them just as easily. Kang Tiho had lived among these floating graves for 3 years now, and he preferred it that way. His mining station was small, barely enough room for one person to live and work. The walls were gray metal, the air was recycled and stale, and the only sounds were the hum of machines and his own breathing. Tiho liked the quiet. After the war, after everything he had seen and done, the silence felt like medicine for his tired soul. He was 32 years old, but his eyes looked older. He had been a combat medic in the Earth-Helix War, spending 4 years pulling wounded soldiers from burning ships and watching too many of them die in his arms. When the war ended, he could not go back to normal life. The crowds, the noise, the questions from people who had never seen what he had seen, it was all too much. So he came here to the edge of human space, where no one asked questions and no one expected anything from him. That morning started like every other morning. Tiho woke up at 6, ate a simple breakfast of protein paste and water and checked his mining equipment. The work was boring but honest. He drilled into asteroids, extracted valuable ore, and sold it to passing cargo ships. It was enough money to survive, and survival was all he wanted. Then his scanner started beeping. Tiho walked to the console and looked at the screen. Something large was drifting through the asteroid field about 2 kilometers from his station. At first, he thought it was just another rock, but the shape was wrong. It was too smooth, too deliberate. His heart beat a little faster when he realized what he was looking at. A ship, an alien ship. He zoomed in with his external cameras and studied the vessel. It was unlike anything humans built. The hull was dark purple, almost black, with strange curved designs that seemed to flow like water frozen in time. There were holes in the side, damage from weapons fire. The ship was dead, its engines cold, its lights dark. Tiho knew he should report this. Protocol demanded that he contact the nearest human outpost and let the authorities handle it. Alien vessels were dangerous, unpredictable, but the nearest outpost was 3 days away, and by then, the ship would have drifted into the deeper asteroid field where no one could reach it. He made a decision that would change his life forever. Tiho put on his space suit, climbed into his small shuttle and flew toward the alien ship. As he got closer, he could see more damage. Something terrible had happened here. Burn marks covered the hull, and several sections had been torn open by explosions. Whatever fight had taken place, it had been violent and desperate. He found an airlock that still seemed functional and attached his shuttle to it. The seal held, and he stepped inside the alien vessel for the first time. The air was thin but breathable. Emergency lights cast a dim red glow over everything, creating shadows that seemed to move on their own. The first body he found was in the corridor. It was an alien, tall and thin, with gray skin and 4 arms. Its eyes were open and empty, staring at nothing. A weapon lay near its hand. Tiho had never seen this species before, but he recognized violence when he saw it. This creature had died fighting. He moved deeper into the ship, stepping over more bodies. Some were the same gray-skinned species. Others were different, shorter and broader with rough brown skin. It looked like 2 groups had been killing each other. A mutiny, perhaps, or an attack from within. The cargo hold was at the center of the ship. Tiho pushed open the heavy door and stepped inside, his flashlight cutting through the darkness. What he saw made him stop breathing. Cages lined the walls, dozens of them, all empty now. Chains hung from the ceiling. The floor was stained with old blood. This was not a cargo ship. This was a slave ship. And in the far corner, still chained to the wall, was a woman. She was not human, but she was beautiful in a strange and haunting way. Her skin was silver, smooth like polished metal, and her eyes glowed with a soft blue light. She was tall, taller than Tiho, with long white hair that hung in dirty tangles around her face. Her clothes were torn rags, and her body was covered in wounds, some fresh and some old. Burn marks in the shape of symbols had been branded into her arms, slave markings. Tiho realized with horror. She looked up at him, and he saw fear in those glowing eyes. Fear and defiance, and something that might have been hope dying slowly. Tiho recognized her species from old military briefings. She was Sarath, a race that humans knew almost nothing about. They were said to be dangerous, cold, without mercy. The war had never reached their territory, but soldiers whispered stories about them. Stories about their strength, their technology, their complete lack of compassion. Looking at her now, chained and bleeding and afraid, Tiho found it hard to believe those stories. She spoke to him in a language he did not understand. Her voice was weak, barely more than a whisper. She was asking something, maybe demanding, maybe begging. He could not tell. But he saw her eyes move to the weapon on his belt, and he understood what she expected. She expected him to kill her, or worse. Tiho looked at the chains holding her to the wall. They were energy restraints, glowing with soft blue light, designed to cause pain if the prisoner moved too much. He had seen similar technology used on prisoners during the war. He had always hated it. He walked toward her slowly, keeping his hands visible. She pressed herself against the wall, her body tense, ready for pain. Tiho stopped in front of her and looked into her eyes. He did not see a monster. He did not see a dangerous alien that deserved to be feared. He saw a person who had been hurt, who had been treated like property, who had probably given up hope a long time ago. He reached for the control panel next to the chains. She made a sound, something between a gasp and a cry. Her eyes went wide. Tiho pressed the release button. The chains fell away and the woman collapsed forward. He caught her before she hit the ground, and she weighed almost nothing in his arms, light as a bird, fragile as glass. She looked up at him with confusion in her eyes, as if he had done something impossible, something she could not understand. Tiho did not speak. He simply lifted her up and carried her out of that terrible ship, away from the cages and the chains and the bodies of the dead. She did not fight him. She did not have the strength. When they reached his shuttle, he laid her down gently on the small medical bed and covered her with a blanket. She was unconscious now, her breathing shallow, her body broken in ways he could not yet see. But she was alive. As Tiho flew back to his station, he looked at the alien woman sleeping behind him and wondered what he had just done. He had broken protocol. He had brought an unknown alien onto his station. He had freed a prisoner without knowing why she was a prisoner in the first place. But when he closed his eyes, all he could see were those chains. All he could hear was that small, hopeless sound she made when she expected him to hurt her. He could not leave her there. He could not walk away. Whatever came next, he would face it, because some things were more important than protocol. Some things were more important than safety. Some things were simply right. The alien woman did not wake for 2 days. Tiho stayed by her side as much as he could, watching her breathe, checking her wounds, making sure she was still alive. He used his old medical training to treat her injuries, cleaning the cuts, bandaging the burns, setting the bones that had healed wrong and needed to be fixed. Her body was different from a human body, but not so different that he could not help her. Her silver skin was cool to the touch, like touching smooth stone on a winter morning. The glow in her closed eyes had faded to almost nothing, and Tiho worried that she might not survive. But on the 3rd day, her eyes opened. She woke suddenly, violently, throwing herself away from him with a scream that echoed off the metal walls. She pressed herself into the corner of the small room, her body shaking, her eyes wild with terror. She was looking at him like he was a monster, like he was the worst thing she had ever seen. Tiho did not move. He sat very still, keeping his hands where she could see them, and he waited. Slowly, very slowly, her breathing calmed. The fear did not leave her eyes, but the panic faded. She looked around the room at the simple bed, the medical equipment, the small window showing the endless field of stars. Then she looked at herself, at the bandages covering her wounds, at the clean clothes he had dressed her in while she slept. She said something in her language. It sounded like a question. Tiho pointed to himself. "Tiho," he said slowly, "my name is Tiho." She stared at him for a long moment. Then she pointed to herself. "Vila," she whispered. It was the first word he understood from her. The days that followed were strange and difficult. Vila did not trust him, and Tiho did not blame her. She had been a slave, chained and beaten and treated like an animal. Trust was not something she could give easily if she could give it at all. He learned to communicate with her using a translation device he had found years ago in a salvage yard. It was old and broken, and it only worked sometimes, but it was better than nothing. Through broken words and simple gestures, they began to understand each other. Vila was surprised that he left her door open. The first morning she stood at the doorway for an hour, just staring at the hallway beyond, as if waiting for a trap to spring. When nothing happened, she took one step out, then another. Then she quickly returned to her room and did not come out again until the next day. Tiho did not push her. He went about his normal work, mining asteroids and maintaining his equipment, and he let her watch him from a distance. He made food and left it outside her door. He found blankets and gave them to her without asking for thanks. When she needed medical care, he asked permission before touching her, and he stopped immediately if she showed any sign of discomfort. One evening, about a week after she woke, Vila finally joined him for dinner. She sat across from him at his small table, eating the simple food he had prepared, and she studied him with those glowing blue eyes. "Why?" she asked through the translation device. Her voice was still weak, but stronger than before. "Why what?" Tiho asked. "Why did you free me? Why do you help me? Why do you not hurt me?" Tiho put down his food and thought about how to answer. It was a simple question, but the answer felt complicated. "You were in chains," he said finally. "I took them off, that is all." Vila shook her head. "That is not all. Nothing is free. Everything has a price. What do you want from me?" "Nothing." She stared at him like he had spoken nonsense. "That is impossible. Everyone wants something. Payment, service, my body, my loyalty. What is your price?" "I do not have a price," Tiho said. "I saw someone who was suffering and I helped. That is what humans do." "That is not what my captors told me about humans," Vila said quietly. "They said humans are weak and foolish and easy to break." Tiho smiled sadly. "Maybe we are weak, maybe we are foolish, but we are not easy to break." Vila was silent for a long time. Then she asked, "Who are you, Tiho? Why do you live alone in this empty place?" So he told her. He told her about the war, about the years he spent saving lives and watching lives end. He told her about the nightmares that still woke him in the darkness, about the faces of dead friends that he saw every time he closed his eyes. He told her about coming to this lonely corner of space because he could not bear to be around other people anymore. He did not know why he told her these things. Maybe because she was a stranger. Maybe because she had suffered too, in different ways but just as deeply. Maybe because for the first time in years, someone was actually listening. When he finished, Vila was quiet, then she spoke. "Among my people I was what you would call a noble," she said. "My family was powerful and respected. I had wealth, status, a future that most could only dream of, but I made enemies, political enemies who wanted what I had. They could not kill me directly, so they sold me to the slavers instead. They took everything from me. My name, my honor, my freedom. They put me in chains and told me I was nothing." Her eyes glowed brighter as she spoke, and Tiho saw pain there, deep and old. "I was on that ship for a long time," she continued. "I saw terrible things, things I cannot speak of. I waited to die, and when death did not come, I wished for it. And then you appeared, a human alone with no reason to help me and every reason to fear me, and you freed me." She reached across the table and touched his hand. Her fingers were cold, but her touch was gentle. "I do not understand you, Tiho. My people believe that every action must be repaid. If someone helps you, you owe them a debt. If someone hurts you, you must hurt them back. It is the way of the universe. But you helped me and asked for nothing. You gave me kindness when I expected cruelty. How am I supposed to balance that debt? Tiho turned his hand over and held her softly. You do not owe me anything, Vila. Kindness is not a transaction. It is not something you buy and sell. It is just something you give, because giving it makes the universe a little less dark. Vila looked at him for a long moment. Then she pulled her hand away and stood up from the table. You are a strange creature, human, she said. I do not know if you are wise or foolish, but I think I am beginning to understand why my people fear yours. Tiho watched her walk back to her room. He did not understand what she meant, but he felt like something had changed between them. A wall had fallen just a little. 2 more weeks passed. Vila grew stronger every day. She started helping Tiho with his work, learning how his equipment functioned, asking questions about human technology and culture. She was intelligent, quick to learn, and surprisingly curious about everything. They talked for hours, sharing stories from their different worlds. Tiho learned that the Serath were an ancient race, older than humanity by thousands of years. They valued honor and debt above all things. Their entire society was built on the principle that nothing was free and everything must be repaid. He also learned that Vila was not just any noble. She was from one of the highest families, a bloodline that could trace its history back to the founding of her civilization. Being sold into slavery was not just a crime against her. It was an insult to her entire people. One morning, Tiho woke to find Vila standing by the window, looking out at the stars. I have to go, she said without turning around. Tiho felt something twist in his chest. He had known this moment would come, but he had not expected it to hurt. Where will you go? He asked. Home. I must reclaim what was taken from me. I must make those who hurt me pay for what they did. Tiho nodded slowly. I understand. Vila turned to face him. I am taking one of your shuttles. I know I should ask permission, but I am not asking. I am telling you. The shuttle is yours, Tiho said. You do not need to ask. She looked at him with something new in her eyes, not confusion anymore. Something deeper, something he could not name. Goodbye, Tiho, she said. I will not forget what you did for me. She walked past him and did not look back. Tiho stood at the window and watched her fly away, the small shuttle disappearing into the darkness between the stars. He told himself it did not matter. He told himself he was happy alone. But as he went back to his empty station and his silent work, he felt something he had not felt in years. He felt lonely. 3 weeks passed like slow water dripping from a broken pipe. Tiho fell back into his old routine. He woke early, ate his simple meals, mined asteroids, and went to sleep in his small bed surrounded by the hum of machines. The station felt emptier now, quieter somehow, even though it had always been just him. He caught himself looking toward the room where Vila had stayed, expecting to see her standing there, asking questions in her broken human words. She never was. He told himself he was being foolish. She was an alien, a stranger, someone who had passed through his life like a comet passing through a solar system. She had her own world, her own problems, her own war to fight. There was no reason for her to think about him ever again. Still, some nights, he dreamed about silver skin and glowing blue eyes. On the 23rd day after Vila left, Tiho's alarm system screamed to life. He jumped out of bed and ran to the console, his heart pounding against his ribs. Multiple contacts were appearing on his scanner coming fast from deep space. Not one ship, not two, a fleet. At least a dozen vessels moving in formation heading straight for his station. Tiho felt cold fear wash through his body. He knew what this meant. The slavers had found him. They had tracked the stolen shuttle, or maybe someone had seen him board that dead ship, or maybe it was just bad luck. It did not matter. They were coming, and he had no way to fight them. He grabbed his old military rifle from the storage locker and loaded it with shaking hands. It was a useless weapon against warships, but he would not go down without a fight. He would make them pay for every step they took onto his station. The fleet got closer. Tiho watched the scanner as the ships entered the asteroid field, weaving through the massive rocks with practiced ease. These were not clumsy merchant vessels or slow cargo haulers. These were warships, built for speed and destruction. He moved to the airlock and waited, his rifle raised, his finger on the trigger. Through the small window, he saw the lead ship approaching his station. It was huge, twice the size of any human military vessel he had ever seen, with a hull that gleamed like dark water under starlight. Strange symbols were painted on its side, symbols that looked almost like flowing script. The ship stopped. A smaller craft detached from its belly and flew toward his station, landing gently on his docking platform. Tiho aimed his rifle at the airlock door and prepared to die. The door hissed open, and Vila stepped through. But she was not the same Vila who had left him 3 weeks ago. That Vila had been broken, wounded, wrapped in borrowed clothes and carrying herself like someone who expected pain around every corner. This Vila stood straight and tall, dressed in armor that shone like liquid silver, with weapons at her hip and a crown of glowing crystals woven into her white hair. Her eyes burned with fierce light, and she moved like a queen returning to her throne. Behind her stood a dozen Serath soldiers, each one tall and strong and armed with weapons Tiho did not recognize. They looked at him with cold eyes, their hands ready to draw their guns at the slightest provocation. Tiho lowered his rifle, but he did not put it down. Vila. She raised her hand, and her soldiers stopped moving. She walked toward him slowly, her boots clicking on the metal floor, and stopped just a few feet away. "Hello, Tiho," she said. Her voice was different now, stronger, more certain, the voice of someone who had remembered who she was. "What is this?" Tiho asked, looking at the soldiers, the ships, the army she had brought to his tiny station. "This is my answer," Vila said. "This is how I repay my debt." She reached into a pouch at her belt and pulled out something small and glowing. It was a pendant, a crystal the color of deep blood, hanging from a chain of silver metal. The crystal pulsed with soft light, like a heartbeat frozen in stone. "When I returned to my world, I found that my enemies had already celebrated their victory," Vila explained. "They had divided my lands among themselves. They had erased my name from the records. They thought I was dead, sold to slavers, forgotten forever." She smiled, and there was something dangerous in that smile. They were wrong. Tiho listened as she told him what happened, how she had landed on her homeworld in secret, gathering loyal servants who still remembered her family, how she had collected evidence of her enemies' crimes, not just against her, but against the laws of her people, how she had brought that evidence before the High Council and exposed the traitors for what they truly were. "They tried to fight," Vila said. "They called their guards, their armies, their allies, but I had something they did not expect." "What?" Tiho asked. "Rage," she answered simply. "The rage of someone who had been chained and broken and left to die. The rage of someone who had nothing left to lose. I tore them apart, Tiho. I destroyed everything they had built on the bones of my family. And when it was over, I stood before the High Council and reclaimed my name." She held up the pendant. "This is a blood oath pendant. Among my people, it is the most sacred gift one can give. It means that I bind myself to you, Tiho. My life, my honor, my entire bloodline. Your enemies are my enemies. Your battles are my battles. For as long as my blood flows through the veins of my descendants, we will answer your call." Tiho stared at the pendant, then at Vila, then at the army waiting behind her. His mind struggled to process what was happening. "Vila, I did not ask for this. I did not help you because I wanted payment." "I know," she said softly. "That is why the debt is so great." She stepped closer to him, and for a moment the queen disappeared, and he saw the wounded woman he had carried out of that slave ship. "You expected nothing," she whispered. "When you found me, you could have sold me back to the slavers for a fortune. You could have used me, hurt me, taken everything I had left. Instead, you freed me. You fed me. You healed me. You gave me kindness when the universe had taught me that kindness did not exist." She pressed the pendant into his hand. The crystal was warm against his palm, pulsing gently like a living thing. Among the Serath, we believe that the value of a gift is measured by the sacrifice of the giver. You sacrificed nothing, Tiho. You helped me simply because it was right. In my entire life, no one has ever done that for me. Not my family, not my friends, not anyone. She closed his fingers around the pendant. "This gift cannot repay what you gave me. Nothing can, but I will spend the rest of my life trying." Tiho looked at the pendant, then at Vila, then at the warships floating outside his window. He felt like he was standing at the edge of a cliff, looking down at a world he had never imagined. "What does this mean?" he asked. "What happens now?" Vila's expression changed. The warmth faded, replaced by something harder, something worried. "That is the other reason I came back," she said. "When I was a slave, I heard things. The slavers were not just criminals working alone. They were part of something bigger, a coalition of species, powerful and ruthless, that has been growing in the shadows for years." "What kind of coalition?" "A war coalition," Vila said. "They are preparing to move against human-occupied space. They believe humans are weak, easy targets, ripe for conquest and slavery. The attack on your colony worlds will begin within months." Tiho felt the blood drain from his face. His sister Yuna lived on a colony world. His few remaining friends from the war were scattered across human space. If what Vila said was true, they were all in terrible danger. "Why are you telling me this?" he asked. Vila met his eyes. "Because you have a choice to make, Tiho. You can stay here alone, mining your asteroids until the war comes and swallows you. Or you can accept my help. You can let me fight beside you. You can let me try to save the people you love the way you saved me." She stepped back and gestured to her soldiers, her ships, her fleet waiting in the darkness of space. "I am offering you everything I have. My army, my ships, my knowledge, my life. All I ask is that you let me help." Tiho looked at the pendant in his hand. He thought about the quiet life he had built here, the peace he had found in solitude. He thought about the war he had left behind and the nightmares that still haunted him. Then he thought about his sister. He thought about the people who would die if no one stood against the coming storm. He put the pendant around his neck. "Okay," he said quietly, "let us go save the world." Vila smiled, and for the first time since he had met her, it reached her eyes. "Then welcome aboard, Tiho. We have much work to do." The Serath warship Luminance was like a floating city made of crystal and steel. Tiho walked through its corridors with Vila at his side, trying not to stare at everything around him. The walls shimmered with soft light, changing colors as they moved past. The ceilings rose high above his head, designed for beings much taller than humans. Everything felt ancient and powerful, as if the ship itself was alive and watching him. The Serath soldiers watched him too. They did not hide their curiosity or their doubt. Here was a human, a member of a species they knew almost nothing about, walking beside their queen as if he belonged there. Tiho felt their stares like needles against his skin, but he kept his face calm and his steps steady. Vila introduced him to her inner circle. Her brother Corin was the first, a warrior with cold eyes and sharp words. He looked at Tiho like he was looking at an insect, something small and meaningless that had somehow found its way into places it did not belong. "So this is the human who freed you," Corin said. His voice dripped with contempt. "He does not look like much." "Looks can be deceiving, brother," Vila answered calmly. "I have learned that lesson well." Corin made a sound of disgust, but said nothing more. Next was Lady Sierra, an older Serath woman who served as Vila's advisor. Her eyes were sharp and calculating, seeing things that others missed. She looked at Tiho like he was a puzzle to be solved, a tool to be used. The human could be valuable, Sierra said thoughtfully. His people will trust him more than they would trust us. He could be our bridge to the human colonies. He is not a tool, Vila said firmly. He is under my protection, remember that. Finally, there was Dren, the captain of Vila's personal guard. He was the largest Sereth Tiho had seen, with arms like tree trunks and a face covered in battle scars. But when he looked at Tiho, there was no hatred in his eyes. Only careful evaluation, the look of one warrior judging another. Dren nodded once slowly. Tiho nodded back. The fleet traveled through space for 5 days, jumping between star systems using technology far beyond anything humans possessed. Tiho spent most of that time in his small cabin, learning everything he could about the Sereth and the war that was coming. The coalition that Vila had warned him about was real, and it was terrifying. 12 different species had joined together under a single banner, united by greed and the promise of easy conquest. They called themselves the Chain, and their symbol was a broken manacle dripping with blood. They specialized in slavery, in conquest, in breaking worlds and selling their people piece by piece. Humanity was their next target. On the 6th day, the fleet arrived at New Busan. New Busan was one of the largest human colony worlds, home to nearly 5 million people. It was named after an ancient city on Earth, and its people were proud, stubborn, and deeply suspicious of outsiders. When a fleet of alien warships appeared in their sky, they did what any sensible colony would do. They pointed every weapon they had at Vila's ships and demanded answers. Tiho stood on the bridge of the Luminance, watching the communication screens light up with angry human faces. Colony officials were shouting demands, military commanders were threatening to open fire, and somewhere in the chaos, a familiar voice cut through the noise. Tiho, is that you? The screen shifted to show a woman about 10 years younger than Tiho, with the same eyes, the same shape of face, the same stubborn set to her jaw. Kang Yuna, his little sister, stared at him from across the void of space with a mixture of shock and disbelief. "Hello, Yuna," Tiho said quietly. "What the hell are you doing?" Yuna demanded. She was wearing the uniform of a colony administrator, and her expression was the same one she had worn when they were children and Tiho had done something stupid. "You disappeared for 3 years, 3 years with barely a message, and now you show up with an alien armada. What is wrong with you?" "It is a long story," Tiho said. "Can we come down and explain?" Yuna stared at him for a long moment. Then she turned to someone off-screen and started giving orders. Within the hour, a small shuttle carrying Tiho, Vila, and 2 of her guards was descending toward the colony's capital city. The meeting with the colony council did not start well. 12 men and women sat around a long table, representing the government, military, and business interests of New Busan. They looked at Vila and her guards with fear and suspicion, their hands never far from the weapons hidden beneath their clothes. "You expect us to believe this?" one of the council members demanded after Vila finished explaining about the chain. "You expect us to trust an alien who shows up with a war fleet and claims to be our friend?" "I expect nothing," Vila answered calmly. "I am simply telling you what is coming. The chain will attack your colony within months. You can prepare or you can die. The choice is yours." "Why should we believe anything you say?" another council member asked. "Your people have never helped humans before. You have never even contacted us. Why now?" Vila looked at Tiho, and he understood what she wanted him to do. He stood up from his chair and faced the council. 3 years ago I left human space because I was tired of fighting," he said. "I wanted peace. I wanted to be alone. But a few weeks ago I found Vila chained in a slave ship, beaten and broken and left to die. I freed her. I helped her heal, and I asked for nothing in return." The council members exchanged glances. She came back, Tiho continued. She brought her fleet, her army, her knowledge of the enemy. She is offering everything she has because I showed her kindness when she expected cruelty. That is the only reason she is here. That is the only reason any of us have a chance. Silence fell over the room. Yuna spoke up. I know my brother. He does not lie and he does not trust easily. If he believes this alliance is real, then I believe it too. Pretty words, Corin muttered from behind Vila. But words do not win wars. No, Yuna agreed, meeting his eyes without flinching. Actions do, so let us talk about actions. The negotiation lasted for hours. Details were argued, concerns were raised, compromises were made. By the end, a fragile agreement had been reached. The Sarath would share their intelligence about the chain. Human forces would begin preparing defenses. Neither side fully trusted the other, but both understood that survival required cooperation. As the council members filed out of the room, one of them lingered behind. He was a small man with nervous eyes and sweaty hands, a minor official who had barely spoken during the meeting. He approached Vila with a smile that did not reach his eyes. Lady Vila, he said smoothly, I just wanted to say that I support this alliance completely. If there is anything I can do to help, anything at all, please let me know. Vila looked at him for a long moment. Thank you for your offer. The man nodded and hurried away. Later that night, Tiho found Vila standing on the balcony of the government building, looking up at the stars. You did not trust that man, he said. No, Vila agreed. There was something false in his words, something hidden. Should we be worried? Vila was silent for a moment. Among my people, we have a saying, the snake that smiles is more dangerous than the snake that hisses. That man is smiling, Tiho. I do not like smiles I cannot understand. Tiho stood beside her, following her gaze to the distant stars where her fleet waited in orbit. Do you think this will work? He asked. Do you think humans and Sarath can really fight together? I do not know, Vila admitted. My people have never trusted outsiders. Your people have never trusted us. But I have learned something in these past weeks, Tiho. I have learned that trust is not given. It is built, one small moment at a time. You taught me that. She turned to face him, and her eyes glowed softly in the darkness. I do not know if this alliance will survive, but I know that it began with you. A single human who chose kindness over fear. If your species can produce such a person, then perhaps there is hope for all of us. Tiho smiled. That is a lot of pressure to put on one person. Good, Vila said. You seem to work well under pressure. They stood together in silence, watching the stars, not knowing that somewhere in the city below, the nervous man with the sweaty hands was sending a secret message to distant ships hiding in the darkness of space. The message was simple. They know you are coming. Attack now. 3 days later, the chain fleet arrived. They came without warning, pouring out of hyperspace like a flood of metal and fire. Hundreds of ships, armed with weapons designed to crack planets open like eggs, descended upon New Busan with a single purpose. The alliance was not ready. The defenses were not complete. The trust between humans and Sarath was still too new, too fragile. But they were going to fight anyway. Because sometimes that was all you could do. The sky above New Busan burned. Ships fell from orbit like dying stars, trailing fire and smoke as they tore through the atmosphere. Explosions lit up the heavens, painting the clouds in shades of orange and red. The sound of war was everywhere, a constant thunder that shook the ground and rattled the windows of every building in the capital city. Tiho stood on the bridge of the Luminance, watching the battle unfold on dozens of screens. The chain fleet was massive, far larger than they had expected. For every enemy ship that the Alliance destroyed, 2 more seemed to take its place. The human defense platforms were falling. The Sarath warships were taking heavy damage. The colony's shields flickered and sparked, slowly failing under the endless assault. We are losing, Corin said grimly. He stood beside Vila, his earlier contempt for humans forgotten in the face of their shared enemy. Their command ship is coordinating everything. As long as it survives, they will keep coming. Then we destroy the command ship, Tiho said. Everyone on the bridge turned to look at him. That ship is in the center of their fleet, Dren rumbled. Protected by 100 vessels, no strike force could reach it. A large strike force, no, Tiho agreed. But a small team might be able to slip through, find a gap in their defenses, get aboard and destroy their coordination network from the inside. Vila studied him with those glowing blue eyes. You are volunteering to lead this mission. I am. You will almost certainly die. Tiho thought about the colony below them, about the millions of people who would be enslaved or killed if the chain won this battle. He thought about his sister, somewhere in the chaos, probably organizing evacuations and refusing to leave until every civilian was safe. Maybe, he said, but if we do nothing, everyone dies anyway. Vila was silent for a long moment. Then she turned to her guards. Prepare a strike shuttle. I am going with him. My queen, no, Corin protested. You cannot risk yourself. If you die, our house falls. Everything we have rebuilt will be lost. Then we will not die, Vila said simply. She looked at Tiho. I owe him a debt I can never fully repay. I will not let him face this alone. The shuttle launched 20 minutes later, carrying Tiho, Vila, Dren, and 5 of the best Sarath warriors. They flew through the chaos of battle, weaving between explosions and debris, using the wreckage of destroyed ships as cover. Twice they were spotted by enemy fighters. Twice they fought their way through. The chain command ship loomed ahead of them, a massive vessel that looked like a beast from an ancient nightmare. Its hull was covered in spikes and blades, and strange symbols glowed along its surface, symbols that seemed to writhe and move in the corner of the eye. There, Dren pointed to a section of the hull where the armor plating had been damaged by earlier attacks. We can breach there. They landed hard, the shuttle scraping against the enemy ship's surface. The team moved quickly, cutting through the damaged hull with plasma torches and dropping into the darkness within. The inside of the chain ship was worse than the outside. The corridors were too narrow, the air was thick with a smell like rotting meat, and strange sounds echoed from every direction. They encountered resistance almost immediately, squads of enemy soldiers who fought with savage desperation. Tiho fought alongside the Sarath, his old military training coming back like muscle memory. He did not have their strength or their technology, but he had something else. He had years of experience fighting in conditions just like this, in the tight corridors of damaged ships where every corner could hide death. They pushed deeper into the vessel, leaving a trail of fallen enemies behind them. The command center was at the heart of the ship, protected by a final line of defenders. The battle was brutal and fast, filling the air with screams and the flash of weapons fire. Tiho saw Dren take a wound to his side, saw 2 of the Sarath warriors fall and not get back up. And then they were through. The command center was a vast chamber filled with strange machines and glowing screens. Cables hung from the ceiling like vines, connecting to a central platform or something that looked like a brain made of metal and crystal pulsed with dark energy. That is their coordination network, Vila said. Destroy it, and their fleet will lose all unified control. Then let us destroy it, Tiho said. But before he could move, a figure stepped out of the shadows. The enemy commander was unlike anything Tiho had ever seen. It was tall, taller even than the Sarath, with too many limbs and eyes that glowed with cold intelligence. It carried a weapon that hummed with deadly energy, and when it spoke, its voice seemed to come from everywhere at once. Foolish creatures, it said. You think you can stop what is coming. You are nothing but insects fighting against a storm. It raised its weapon and fired. Tiho saw the blast coming. He saw it heading straight for Vila, who was too far away to dodge. and without thinking, without hesitation, he threw himself in front of her. The blast hit him in the chest. Pain exploded through his body, worse than anything he had ever felt. He fell to the ground, his vision going dark around the edges, his blood pooling beneath him. He heard Vila scream something, heard the roar of weapons fire, heard the crash of the enemy commander falling. Then everything went quiet. He woke up in a medical bay, surrounded by soft lights and the gentle hum of healing machines. For a long moment, he just lay there, breathing, feeling his heart beat in his chest, marveling at the fact that he was still alive. Then he turned his head and saw Vila sitting beside his bed. She looked exhausted. Dark circles surrounded her eyes, and her silver skin seemed paler than before. But when she saw him looking at her, she smiled, and some of the tiredness faded from her face. "You are awake," she said softly. "What happened?" Tiho asked. His voice came out as a croak. "We won," Vila said. "You destroyed the command network. The chain fleet fell into chaos and we drove them away. New Busan is safe. Your sister is safe. The alliance held." Tiho closed his eyes and let out a long breath. "Good, that is good." "You almost died, Tiho." He opened his eyes and looked at her, "But I did not." "Because I refused to let you." Vila's voice cracked slightly. "The doctors said you should not have survived. Your wounds were too severe, but I ordered them to keep trying. I threatened them, begged them, told them that if they let you die, I would tear this ship apart with my bare hands." Tiho smiled weakly. "That seems excessive." "Perhaps." Vila reached out and touched his hand, "but I meant it, every word." They sat together in silence for a while, the only sound the quiet beeping of the medical machines. "Why did you do it?" Vila asked finally. "Why did you jump in front of that blast for me?" Tiho thought about the question. It deserved an honest answer. "I do not know," he admitted. "I did not think about it. I just saw the weapon aimed at you and I moved. It felt like the only thing I could do." Vila shook her head slowly. "That is what I do not understand about your species. You throw yourselves into danger for others without hesitation, without calculation, without any thought of debt or repayment. It makes no sense to me." "Maybe it does not need to make sense," Tiho said. "Maybe it is just who we are." The door to the medical bay opened and Yuna walked in. She looked like she had not slept in days, but when she saw Tiho awake, her face lit up with relief. "You idiot," she said, rushing to his side. "You absolute idiot, do you know how worried I was?" "I missed you too, Yuna," Tiho said. Yuna punched his shoulder gently, then pulled him into a careful hug. When she finally let go, she turned to look at Vila. "Thank you," she said simply, "for bringing him back, for saving all of us." Vila shook her head. "I did not save anyone. Your brother did. I was simply following his lead." Yuna looked between them and a knowing smile crossed her face. "Whatever you say, Lady Vila, whatever you say." Days passed. Tiho healed slowly, his body recovering from wounds that should have killed him. Vila stayed by his side through all of it, talking with him, reading to him, simply sitting in comfortable silence when words were not needed. One evening, Yuna came to visit and found Vila still there, watching over Tiho as he slept. "You care about him," Yuna said quietly, "really care." Vila did not look away from Tiho's sleeping face. "He unchained me when he had no reason to. He asked for nothing when he could have demanded everything. Among my people, such an act creates a bond that goes beyond time. He saved me, not just my life, but my soul. I will spend the rest of my existence trying to be worthy of that gift." Yuna nodded slowly. "Just promise me you will take care of him. He has been alone for too long. He needs someone who sees him, really sees him for who he is." "I promise," Vila said. Later that night, Tiho woke to find Vila still beside him, her hand resting on his. "You are still here," he said. "I will always be here," she replied. "That is what the blood oath means." Tiho looked at her glowing eyes and silver skin, at the face that had become so familiar to him in such a short time. "I did not free you because I wanted an ally," he said. "I did not help you because I wanted an army or a fleet or a debt repaid." "I know," Vila said. "You did it because you could not bear to see someone in chains. You did it because your heart would not let you walk away. That is what makes you different, Tiho. That is what makes humans so terrifying to the rest of the galaxy." "Terrifying?" Tiho laughed softly. "We are not terrifying." "You are," Vila insisted. "Not your weapons, not your technology, not your military strength, but your compassion. Your reckless, impossible, irrational compassion. You care about strangers. You sacrifice yourselves for people you have never met. You love without calculation and give without expectation." She leaned closer to him. "In a universe built on debt and repayment, on power and control, your species stands alone. You love simply to love. You help simply to help. And that, Tiho, is the most dangerous thing in all of creation." Tiho smiled. "I just did not want anyone to be in chains." Vila smiled back, the first true smile she had ever shown since the day they met. "And that, human, is why you have my heart." Outside the window, the stars shone cold and distant. But inside the small medical bay, surrounded by soft light and quiet warmth, two people from different worlds sat together and looked toward a future neither of them could have imagined. The war was not over. The chain would return. More battles would come. But for now there was peace, there was hope, and there was love, found in the most unexpected place, born from the simplest act of kindness. A man had unchained a woman, and she had returned with a gift beyond measure. That was the story of how the galaxy changed. That was the story of how humanity showed the universe what it truly meant to be human.